Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to today's webinar, which is brought to you by Shared Services Link in association with the Tungsten Network, a Kofax company. Today, we're looking at 80% touchless invoicing within 24 months, within 2 years. My name is Susie West. I'm the founder and CEO at Shared Services Link, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. Our main speaker is Jaroslav Shrupek, who is the co-head of Finance Shared Services at Upfield. It's great to have Jaroslav with us today. And we are joined again by Ruud van Helten, who is VP of Compliance at the Tungsten Network. So great to have both gentlemen with us today. Make sure you get the most out of your time, ask your questions. Please put them to me as and when, just text them to me as and when on the GoToWebinar platform, and I will be putting them to Jaroslav and Ruud in the last 10 minutes of this session. If you like us, spread the word, tell your peers about us or your colleagues, and please go ahead and download the slides after this webinar, should you want to refer back to them. So a bit of context for today. Upfield is a very large organisation. It's the largest plant-based consumer product company in the world. It's also very much a digital first organisation, which Jaroslav will be talking a bit more about. And it's an organisation that was spun off from Unilever in 2018. So back in 2018, 100% of the AP invoices were actually paper-based, and by 2020, so 2 years on, a real kind of jaw-dropping 75% of the Upfield's supplier base of 8,000 suppliers were invoicing Upfield electronically. So this is really their story as to how on earth did they deal with all of this whilst going through a massive transition, spinning off from Unilever. They also set up shared services directly after that, so huge change going on. What were some of the main challenges that they had to confront and deal with, and how did they see these great, and anyone would say successful figures within a relatively short period of time? So let's find out more about that. But before I hand over to Jaroslav, let's find out a bit about you, please. So if you wouldn't mind just answering these two poll questions, and then we'll hand over to you, Jaroslav. So how many invoices do you process each year globally? Is it less than 100,000, 100,000 to a quarter of a million, a quarter of a million to 500,000, 500,000 to 1 million, or is it more than 1 million invoices each year? So this is all of your third-party invoices that you're processing on an annual basis and globally. So closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results. So we can see a bit of normally we get a bar curve, but it's kind of worked in the opposite way. So quite a high percentage of you are actually processing fewer than 100,000 invoices, and about at the other end, 13% are processing more than 1 million invoices a year. So an interesting spread there. And let's just have a moment to reflect on what what percentage of your invoice volume is received as an electronic file today. So when we talk about electronic, and I know that Jaroslav is going to talk about this in just a minute, his definition of what touchless is, we're not including PDFs. We're really just talking about kind of computer to computer electronic file that's received into your organization today, either through an EDI, through an e-invoicing network, that kind of thing. So not including PDFs in the mix. What percentage of your invoice volume is received as an electronic file today? None. 1 to 10%, 11 to 50%, 51 to 75%, or is it over 75% received electronically today? Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results coming up on your screen. So about 11% of you talk about having your completely paper. A very, very large part of the attendees today are at very low kind of levels of electronic, somewhere between 1 and 10%. And then kind of moving further up that chain, we've got about 10, 11% of you actually over 75%. So congratulations to you. Right. So Jaroslav, great to have you with us today. So let's kick off. Can you tell us a little bit about what was kind of a bit about the company and your role in the company?
Hello, Susie. Hello, everyone. Upfield, as you said, is the largest plant-based food company currently on the planet, which is quite an amazing piece and quite an amazing story. So we are the #1 plant-based butter, margarine, and spreads, creams, and cheese producer. You can see some of the names on the left-hand side photograph. Some of them you probably are aware or even using in your daily routines. Our cheese range is the BioLife range, which is part of our passionate team in being produced in Greece. But the most interesting thing is, as we call ourselves here, we are the most established startup in FMCG. So bearing in mind that the company is only about 4 years old, because this is when we have been separated from Unilever through the private equity buyout. We are a sizable business. Yeah, we're talking revenues of about 3 billion euros. So that's not a small business to run, and therefore it has got all the complexities connected with it. We are very much all about the future of food, all about the sustainability, and not only in terms of the product, not only in terms of the ecology and the fact that our products are producing far less carbon footprint, but it also is about the packaging and the number of different suppliers that we have to operate with. So I will be talking about the suppliers relation and how we are managing that in terms of the invoicing and handling the invoices in a moment, because that's the main part of our conversation. So if you can go to the progress the slides. So a little bit about the spin-off. Our business was originally set up as part of the much bigger construct of the Unilever company. And it has been performing reasonably well. But at a certain point, strategic decisions taken in Unilever made it so that that particular part of the business was carved out and has been separated as a separate line of business, and offered for the investment opportunity, which was realized by the private equity fund. That the important part of it, that until that moment, everything we did was integrated within the bigger construct of the Unilever organization. So it has been served by the shared services, it was using the same systems. So everything was very much aligned to what the Unilever has invested and have done. And by creating that separation piece, creating that spin-off, that meant that we had to go through the raft of challenges, starting from putting our own SAP, our ERP system in place, making sure that all our suppliers are connected and they are being transitioned over to us without much of the impact on the downstream operations. That also meant that we had to find a way of getting all the invoices in a place. We couldn't rely on the systems that Unilever had, and therefore we had to decide how we are going to operate. And our choice at the time was to go with tungsten as the best leverage pre-existing product, which has been going through the process of rollout in the Unilever. So it just felt like a right choice for us as a starting point. All that process has taken us a couple of years, so it wasn't an easy undertaking. The planning and then the delivery from the moment of separation, it took us until the early time of 2020 when we said, fine, okay, we are now fully separated business. We are operating on our own ERP platform with our own backup systems supporting us. That's how we did it.
And it was around that time, Yaroslav, that you went ahead and set up your own shared services, right? Can you tell us a bit more about what happened then and what did that transition look like?
Sure.
operating from Unilever and then going ahead and setting up shared services?
So as I said, because we were spinning off from the Unilever already had the shared services. Now for organization of our size, which was much smaller, equally the main fundamental goals were to make sure that we are able to deliver that whole project on time and on money. And therefore the option of trying to go kind of in a traditional way and start kind of organically from operating ourselves and then deciding to go into the shared services later on, that was not necessarily the option. So basically, right from the start, the whole conversation was about we are going to teaming up with a partner who is going to provide us with the necessary transactional services, and we will be providing those kind of the mid-tier relationship management with the end markets and the management oversight. And as you can see on that chart, we are operating from about 5 places around the globe. Our main service hub is in India. We've got the second biggest hub in Poland, and we've got a couple of smaller locations in Guatemala, Mexico, and Turkey, which are very specific for either from the language dependency perspective or particular skills which we keep. So majority of our people are working from India and Poland. That has been established, as said, post in the late 2018, early 2019, post business separation, and it has been always part of the finance function. So the whole shared services are reporting through the group controller into the group CFO. Currently, as said, we are operating a hybrid model. So it's not fully outsourced or it's not fully insourced. Yeah, we are operating hybrid model where we've got altogether about 200 people, more or less. And there is a ratio of 1 to 3 people between Upfield associates and BPO provider. Mm-hmm. Services, you can see down on the page, we covering the all core processes which are in the business. Yeah, record to report, supply chain finance, treasury, back office and middle office, source to pay, bill to cash and master data. And within source to pay, we are talking about the invoice processing, payments, employee claims, goods received, invoice received, and reconciliations. And we also are providing below something which is called below clip purchase requisition processing for the indirect procurement. We also have a procure to pay help desk to ensure we are able to deliver the on the queries which might be coming from the suppliers. As said, our core system is ERP. We are operating on a single SAP S/4HANA estate. And in terms of supporting technologies, we are using Tungsten for the invoicing. We're using Zelix to help us with some of the duplicates and some of the compliance checks. Maestro, which is our global data management supporting tool. And we also have started deploying, and we're using the robotic process automation solution based on the UiPath platform. Some of the numerics, which might be interesting for those who are listening, we are talking roughly about 8,600 vendors of different types, 1,070 of directs, over 7,000 indirect, and 420 non-PO suppliers. And what we mean by that, those are the usually tax offices or those kind of entities from which you wouldn't be expecting to raise the PO for the services being delivered. So it's like water, electricity, gas, and other utilities, yeah, telephony, for example, but also car rental or the car leasing that we are using quite a lot. In terms of important pieces, in terms of how many vendor records we do, that's roughly about 110 per month. We're talking about average 16,500 invoices per month, which we are processing currently. This is current year numbers. If I would extrapolate it over the previous year, probably that has been bigger in total. And of the total number of invoices, i.e. all the invoices which are going through us, we are covering 52% through the e-invoices. So I will explain why there is a difference between the 80% and the 52, which is the number, in a second. And the last stats, which I have got a very late moment, is that on average we are executing roughly about 22,000 payments in a normal month. And in the quarter end months, we're having about 32,000 payments that we are executing. And that very much correlates with our payment terms, but also with certain buying patterns that happen in our business.
Great, thanks for all of that. I think that gives everyone a really clear idea as to kind of the nature of your shared services organisation. So thanks for taking the time to do that, Jaroslav. You obviously have a view of what kind of touchless invoicing is, and I know that it's a big focus for you. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. I mean, we are defining the touchless as the situation in which there is a fundamental electronic exchange of the document from the source, which is supplier, to our transactional system. That's how we defining touchless. Therefore, the PDF invoices, as you have mentioned, are not being counted as touchless, because that means that there needs to be a bit of the human intervention to interpret the information and to make sure that it ends up being posted or certain data is being captured in a right way that allows further processing in our system. So our touchless, and this is where we're coming back to the 80%, was that has been defined as agreed geographical and functional scope of how the tungsten tool deployment has been scoped, and what we have achieved in terms of the volume delivered via that tool. So as we have gone through, and I will be covering this in a moment, that's how we have been able to scope and size and determine the ability for tungsten to penetrate the markets and help us achieve that kind of level of automation in the invoice receipts. Now, long-term ambition for us goes way beyond that, yeah, and we want to extend the touchless beyond just receipt of the invoice, but we want to make sure that the whole process end to end is being done as much as possible through the rules, through the automated process and digital platform. So we would be able to achieve a full end-to-end touchless process for the invoice processing from receipt to the payment, and trying to get to the level of 60%. And that is a very ambitious target, knowing how different how the environment also is moving and developing. But I believe that this is something which is worth aiming for, because it will give us the efficiency and control of the compliant environment. So that's how we look at it.
Great. We're going to come on to other drivers as well in just a moment. So just before we find out a bit more about Jaroslav, his drivers for e-invoicing outside the obvious kind of cost effectiveness and process efficiency, let's just spend a moment on what your main drivers are for those who have already engaged in e-invoicing, but those who are also looking to do e-invoicing in the next few months, next year or so. So we're looking for your number one driver. You can just select one. So we've moved out cost, we've moved out productivity, we've moved out process efficiency. Those are the obvious ones. Which of these following drivers is the highest number one priority for you outside the obvious ones? So is it compliance with government mandates, increased data accuracy, positive environmental impact, increased supply chain resilience or health? Is it fraud prevention? So you can untick one of your choices if you want to, but and then move it to another selection. But please do tell us which is the number one driver for you outside the obvious ones of process efficiency, cost effectiveness, and increased productivity. So closing the poll shortly. We're about 56% of you responding. So if you haven't already responded, please do so. Let's see if we can nudge those numbers up. We do have a clear winner. So if you haven't participated, please do so. Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Thank you. We've got 65% of you responding, and there is a clear winner, which is increased data accuracy, which is quite interesting, at 60%. And then a strongish second at 27%, being in compliance with government mandates. I can only imagine that that percentage is going to go up and up and up as people educate themselves on what the mandates are and how we have to fulfill them in the next few months and years. And then a slightly poor kind of third, fourth and fifth with single-digit responses there for environmental, increased supply chain resilience and health and fraud prevention. So very interesting. Let's go back to you, please, Yaroslav, and if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about what your main drivers were.
Sure, thank you, Susie. So as said, I mean, our organization is a fraction of the size of the of Unilever. So for us, the move for the e-invoicing was driven predominantly by those kind of things that you can see on a screen and which I cover. But the people count was one of them. Yeah, we just couldn't afford to have like an army of people in the back office doing nothing else but processing manually invoices for the purpose of our operation. And because on top of it we were operating in a very dynamic environment, the number of transactions that are being concluded on a daily basis and weekly basis is quite huge, and therefore making sure that we are able to process it properly, fast and error-free is fundamental for our ability to maintain good relationship with suppliers. Visibility of the payables and the amounts which are due is also critical for our cash flow planning and payments processing, to make sure that we are optimizing the working capital to the fullest potential. Bearing in mind that we are operating as part of the private equity, that kind of part of the whole equation relating to the working capital and being cash positive all the time is really important consideration in the whole scheme of things. The next piece, which was the other driver, is we couldn't afford a situation where we've got something which we call a loss tree from the outset. Okay, what I mean by loss tree is the situation where the invoices are being delivered in paper form to someone in our organization, and basically they end up on the desk or in the drawer, and then they are being forgotten, lost, or misused, misplaced, and eventually the only way that we are learning from that something has not been paid is because the supplier is calling us and is telling us that there is an invoice missing, there is overdue amount, and they are not going to supply necessary services or raw materials to our organization. So for us, making sure that those components are being managed properly was a fundamental decision driver for the whole solution to be put in place. Now, saving cost on a manual document handling, that's just the obvious one. Okay, so that's not something which should be a surprise for any one of you. As I said, improved supplier relationship was another one, and I will be touching on this in a moment when I talk about what exactly we have, how exactly we have shaped the tungsten solution for us. And the last piece is error identification right at the point of invoice receipt. So if we know that we get something through the tungsten, we are able to very quickly check it against our internal systems like Ariba with the PO orders, etc. And we can say, okay, are we able to do the three-way match? Do we have all the necessary information on the invoice? Yes, no. If no, we can bounce it off back to the supplier and say, can you please do the necessary adjustments? And that whole process is happening very fast. Therefore, there is very limited time latency and time delay on getting the right documents first time and on time and every time, in fact. So that those were the main drivers for us, Susie.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I know now that you're going to talk a little bit more about the actual projects and some of the kind of the key learnings for you. Can you tell us a bit more about all of that, Yaroslav?
Yes, with pleasure. The main consideration when we were doing the transition of the whole P2P processes and or source to pay processes, in fact, post the separation, was to make sure that we are able to keep the suppliers management and supplies of goods and services intact, yeah, to have the continuous process. But for some of those entities, they were already enabled in Unilever system before our separation. But the moment you separate, effectively you're cutting off the line. And something which existed as part of the Unilever doesn't necessarily automatically becomes your own reality and your life. So that was one of the major pieces, that to keep that kind of relationship, we had to look for a solution which was same or similar in functionality that those suppliers were already using, so that supplier management and kind of touch feel is maintained. And therefore, because we were setting up the SAP right from the scratch, we had no previous experience or anything, then what we decided was to get us ready, and because we hadn't had an alternative product to go with or anything to say, okay, we've got the platform, therefore we can just borrow with pride and go along. We decided to work with Tungsten as a partner. An important thing for us was to make sure that we do understand our estate right from the outset. Okay, knowing exactly which entities are trading with who are our vendor, who are our supplier partners. Make sure that we've got all the necessary data, contracts, and all other bits and pieces properly mapped out and registered. So it's like a checklist. Do you know your supplier? Do you know what is going on to be happening and how you have to handle it? And also making sure that the ownership of it is being transferred over from the pre-existing relationship in Unilever to our new procurement organization and also shared services, which was shaping up at the time. It was important to make sure that those entities which we could borrow, because they were part of the original Tungsten network, we could, but then on top of it, we had to set up all the new entities that were needed and to enable them to make sure that the transition of the suppliers happens. Therefore, there were some short-term limitations, and it is important to understand them, yeah, and to note them down on your project plans, and then actively manage them to make sure that nothing is being left to chances and to accidental errors. Then, as part of the whole transfer relationship, we were very much staying connected with our supplier, which is Tungsten, and they have been of a great help. So we were using their collateral, their communication channels, their narrative to basically help us communicate with the vendors on how the whole thing is going to operate, what are the roles, responsibilities, how to make that whole lending easy for them. So that whole transition plan has been really done in detail to understand all the ins and outs and potential mitigation plans in case something did not work, did not happen as anticipated. We were not rushing that whole process, because equally as putting the tool itself, it is important to make sure that this is connecting to your main system. So bearing in mind that we were doing like two things in parallel at the same time, and there was dependency, hard technology dependency between the two. We had to be very careful how we have been rolling out the Tungsten tool. So as we were going through the waves of the SAP implementation, that is exactly how we also have followed with the Tungsten. So SAP gone first. As we were building up the configuration for SAP, we were testing also the Tungsten pieces. And then once they have been done, interfaces have been tested for every market, for every for those kind of configurational items, to make sure that when you put the suppliers on, they really get a good experience. They do not fall into the technology barriers, and which would create potential perception barrier, and therefore disadvantage us in terms of managing. And once that has been done, once we have pushed it over, then as the last stop, we were switching off the interfaces with the Unilever system to basically cut off the old ways of working and moving the suppliers into our own system. So that's how it all was packaged up. And as I say, there are couple of key points to take away, to make sure that you do understand your own organization. How does it operate? What's the size of a price? What's your geographical disposition of your suppliers? Are they in the developed countries or developing countries? What is the internet infrastructure? What is the level of the IT literacy and the penetration of sometimes very basic tools? And then you have to go through the whole mapping exercise, getting into the planning, and then making sure that you go through that plan and you do thorough testing as part of it before you do the switchover. And your partner is your friend. Your partner is basically your closest and most intimate friend in that whole exercise, from whom you can learn a lot, and you can use their knowledge of previous implementation to just help you out on the journey.
Great. So a couple of questions. So how did you decide which entities to target first? Was there something, what was your kind of criteria? Was it volume? Was it kind of key markets that you wanted to get on board first? How did you decide your approach?
So the main approach, because of the nature of our business, which is more kind of like manufacturing driven, was that those markets in which we were having our manufacturing establishments, and therefore there was a big demand for the direct buying, they were the kind of the first ones to make sure that we are able to get that whole piece managed. It wasn't a massive number of markets, but all of them are developed markets. I think we had one factory in Africa which we needed to take care of, but that was one of the challenges which Tungsten helped us overcome. All the others were in States and in Europe, and therefore it wasn't that much of a necessarily of the issue, right? But that's how that was our scoping. So the scoping was which markets are providing the biggest value for the invoices in terms of the value of invoices, not necessarily volume of invoices, because that would come as a second tranche, and making sure that we've got the sustainability of the business in the first place. That was the most critical part for us. But once we've got this established for the core markets, which were roughly about 15 or 20 markets, then rolling it out to the rest of the markets, that just came as a natural consequence.
Yeah. Okay, great. And you did say as well that you were kind of rolling out at the same time that you were rolling out SAP. So you were kind of, it was in step with your SAP implementation.
Indeed, it was.
Yeah.
Indeed,
and was that also in step with your shared services migration, or was that done separately?
No, it was all in the same time. So I mean, that's the challenge of any separation. You don't have you can't necessarily do things in a stacked approach. You have to make sure that you are able to do all the stuff in one go. which of course means quite a lot of pressure on resources internally, and also the partners who are involved in that whole process.
Yeah. So Yaroslav, that probably takes us quite nicely onto some of the challenges and how you handled them. You want to start with the big ones?
Yes, we can. I mean, in no particular order, I would say, but for us, the fundamental was that the procurement team with the chief procurement officer, they have been absolutely there right from the start, understanding what they are trying to do in terms of the scope and approach that we wanted to achieve, and that was a great help because it allowed the project to be well defined and with very clear measures of success from the operational perspective. And we did manage that whole e-invoicing situation as a project. So it had dedicated resources who were doing nothing else but making sure that that whole project is delivered. So we did not treat it as kind of like business as usual activity that, well, let's do it as just a technology implementation. Because a part of the fact that, yes, Tungsten is a technology platform, there is quite a lot of change management and communication and people management involved in that whole process. And equally, you've got also the whole component about the data, which have been quoted as data integrity being one of the reasons why you want that kind of thing to be implemented. So thinking about it is exactly, you know, where you want this to be from the perspective of preparing the master data to start with, to make sure that the right information is being fed into the Tungsten and you are able to operate with the trusted set of information. Understanding suppliers and our key data, that was one of the next items which were absolutely fundamental for us. And what I'm saying was about this kind of volumetric, yeah? Where does the real volume sit? Where does the real risk to our operation sit, and how we are able to address it and mitigate it through the deployment of the tool as we were going by. And also in terms of what we have been doing, how that all fits into the overall bits and pieces, right? From the whole process, yeah, the later parts of the process, which were to do with receiving the goods, doing the goods received or services received notes, doing the three-way matching, and then getting into ultimately into the whole processing time. Yeah, that whole, if you start thinking about it end to end instead of like a point solution, then that is also giving you quite a lot of insights into how you really want that to be played as a strategic tool of choice. Above that, we had to overlay the whole tax legal statutory rules, and I will come to that in a moment in the last slide, but it's not like you can go with the particular choice and it will fit everywhere in the same way. In certain geographies, in certain markets, you will be facing the situation that there is already something kind of mandated by the government sometimes, a platform that you have to use. And if and when Tungsten is already incorporating that kind of solution, that is brilliant, that helps you, the whole rollout. It is far more challenging if something is not already integrated. Then you have to make a choice how you're going to operate with it. And in our case, we had to think about Turkey as one example where we are using the local solution for the purpose of invoice receipt and exchange, which is integrating with the government servers. And we've got a very similar situation in the LATAM markets where we are using Edicom platform for the same purpose. It was just a natural choice of something which we are able to acquire, deploy, and use in a very fast succession, based on our project timelines of the separation plan. So that's why we choose the way they were. Looking at different things, if you think about what we have been thinking about and making sure that we are not losing the sight of it, is that kind of like integration of the workflows, making sure that you've got this kind of touchless flow of invoices, and making sure that the failures in that kind of technology piece and how the application operates, that this is being eliminated way before you start pushing the high volume of invoices. Yeah, because if you get issues and you don't address them, and you then start pushing the volume, that means that the number of exemptions or errors which the system is going to throw out, that is something which the people will have to manage. And that means that your platform is not being optimized to deliver exactly the efficiency and the effective cost effectiveness that you would be hoping for. As I said, providing suppliers with the complete package, that was another one. So it's not only about giving them ability to log their invoices into Tungsten and through that getting that invoice to us, but also other way around, it is for us to be able to provide the information to them in terms of what is the status of the invoice. So has this been accepted? Has this been approved? Is it in the pipeline for the payment? And when the payment is done, okay, providing them with the remittance information that the invoice has been paid. Therefore, the whole thing is all in order. That is a very important part to consider when you're deciding, okay, which parts of the Tungsten solution you want to use. Now, the more you can package, the more modules you can package all together, the bigger value in sense it is for the suppliers, and the less time you have to spend in manually handling any queries or any issues that might be there. And the last thing from those kind of important pieces is to make sure that you agree and you design your reports which are fit for purpose for what you're trying to understand and how you are monitoring the whole food chain.
Thank you. I think we'll skip past those last three and move on to the final slide there, Yaroslav, just to give Ruud enough time. So some of your kind of ongoing, what the future looks like.
Couple of main pieces. As I said, we are using free platforms, and I mentioned it a moment ago. The very important part for us, and this is our reality, is that the procurement policies are key to organizational process effectiveness. So the things like no PO, no pay policy, and mandating the Tungsten as a platform of choice for the invoice receipt. That is something which we are putting into our terms and conditions and our contracts with the suppliers, and that helps a lot because that basically sets the agenda and the conversation in the right way, right from the start of the relationship management. That having said, it doesn't mean that Tungsten can cover everything, and therefore you need to think about other solutions and other ideas that will help you reduce the number of paper that you need to handle. And you might consider P-cards or catalog buying or the T&E agency to just reduce that number of the paper which is flowing through your organization. From my perspective, things do change. Yeah, we are not living in the vacuum. And the main piece for me, which is really important, is the whole growing trend in varying countries of the compliance, VAT compliance, invoice compliance, and all the other bits and pieces where the governments wants to control very important source of the country income, and therefore the chances that those kind of things like white books or the special portals where all the invoices have to be logged through for the transparency and visibility of the tax offices, that is going to become more and more a reality in different markets. Therefore, making sure that you've got the solution that is integrating with those ideas is really important. Otherwise, you are going to end up with zillions of systems that you will have to connect to, depending on your geographical reach. So that's how we operate, right? And as I say, we are there at about 80% mark, but we would like to push it even further to about 85, 87% of that agreed geographical cover that we had established ourselves as a target.
Great, thank you so much, Jaroslav. Now we're going to bring in Ruud. So you touched a bit on the compliance kind of concerns and mandates there. So over to you, Ruud, to tell us a little bit more about what's going on in your world, please.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you so much, Jaroslav, for that such a compelling story that you just shared. I heard nothing but best practice, basically. And Jaroslav has already talked to us about what's happening out there with governments stepping in very hard in order to improve their tax collection. And that's exactly what's happening. Let's face it, I mean, governments have many challenges today. There's environmental emergencies, there's conflict, there's healthcare emergencies, there's soaring energy prices, and what we are probably all seeing all the time is that governments need to step in and help us, and help businesses with either tax relief or even reducing energy bills. At the end of the day, that money needs to come back, and at the end of the day, all those initiatives need funding. So what we are seeing on a daily basis now, much more than a few years ago, is that governments are literally stepping in, as Jaroslav also already suggested. And stepping in here means that the governments are literally building platforms that help them collect tax. Stepping in also means that they will require specific reports and quite a lot more information about transactions between businesses versus where they were before. To give you some numbers, currently there are at least 6 European countries that are announcing a version of what we call a mandate. A mandate literally means that there is a government entity that requires to see the invoices before these are sent to the buyer. So it literally means that before you can even, as a supplier, send your invoice to your buyer, you need to send it to the government first. The technologies are there to build these very large platforms to handle these volumes. And the business case, to be really honest, is a complete no-brainer. Italy has been extremely successful here, and all other countries in Europe are currently sort of contemplating something similar. The painful bit is that these 6 countries that have now announced their mandates are looking at implementations over the next 18 months. That's something we haven't seen before. Such a very condensed period of time in which 6 major economies are implementing a completely new way of, or forcing a completely new way upon businesses to run their e-invoicing is absolutely unparalleled. We've not seen that before, and that's going to cause issues. It's going to cause disruption. Because let's face it, for most of you on the call, electronic invoicing is not your core business. You do completely different things. So that's also why Jaroslav has gone for a partner, and actually multiple solutions. We'll come to speak about that in a second. The other thing about these mandates, about these government interventions, is unfortunately that they cause governments to make many changes, and very often these changes are with very, very short notice. Good example of that is the most recent changes in Italy, which we received around about the beginning of September, that have a live date of October. You have a month to make fairly fundamental changes in the way your systems work. And of course, if you need to do all of that yourself in multiple countries, that becomes very difficult, very disruptive. At the same time, the hunger for data doesn't stop with the invoice, unfortunately. Governments want more data, they want more visibility. And for instance, cross-border invoices, so invoices you receive from foreign entities, from foreign suppliers, are usually out of scope for these mandatory electronic invoicing platforms. It has a reason, it has to do with European legislation, but typically these are simply out of scope. So you'll continue to receive paper PDF invoices from foreign suppliers. However, the government does want visibility of these invoices, and because they can't force e-invoicing, they force e-reporting. We've seen this in Italy again, where from July 1st of this year, companies need to report their cross-border invoices, so invoices they received from or foreign vendors, to the Italian government in exactly the same format as electronic invoices. That sounds very straightforward, but it's a very difficult thing to do. There's all sorts of complexities with that, for instance, with reverse charge invoices. How do you report a reverse charge invoice to the government if you have already accomplished reverse charging, for instance? So it's not just about providing the data, it's also about looking at the, let's say, the effect of tax treatment on then the reports. Another complexity is, which I'm sure all of you are acutely aware of, is that many of these mandates and these e-reporting requirements combine periodic with transactional controls. And these things, these controls, these sets of data do not necessarily reside in the same area, EI or ERP. Your transactional data may simply not contain the periodic data, which means that at the end of the day, all these government interventions drive large IT and ERP change projects that continue to change. And the best way forward really is to look at a partner that can isolate you or insulate you from all that change. Does it stop there? Does it stop with the mandatory electronic invoicing and with the reporting? No, it doesn't. There are I would say a whole raft of new taxes coming our way, very much under the number of ESG, which is the one I'm going to lift out here. ESG, as you can see the blob on the left-hand side from global environment. ESG are taxes that have to do with environment, with social equality, and also with governance. It basically has to do with, if you wish, social responsibility. Things like plastic packaging tax, carbon tax, chemical tax, sugar and fat tax, junk food tax, depending on which country you're in, will see the light. And all governments, pretty much also as an outflow of the summit in Glasgow last year, where pledges were made to actually impose these taxes, we'll see countries now resorting to these taxes and implementing it. And this is a global trend. It's not something that you will just see in Europe. It's happening in Africa. It's happening literally everywhere in the world. These taxes are not simple. Very often, these taxes are not percentages, but there are that kind of nominal amounts, which makes it difficult. It is not per se so that you can charge these taxes back to your customer, but you may need to negotiate these. And then thirdly, they affect the VATable base. So our drive to implement more indirect taxation actually has an effect on how we invoice. There's a good number of countries that you need to watch from an indirect tax perspective. We call it a tsunami of change. This is not even the complete global picture, but it does actually highlight quite a number of developments we are aware of today. We developed these slides together with PricewaterhouseCoopers to ensure that we capture the most important changes globally. This is only VAT or GST and potentially reporting in SAFT. It doesn't even incorporate the ESG taxes I was just referring to, and there will be many of those. We expect by 2027, so in 5 years' time roughly, that about 50% of all countries globally will have implemented some sort of an e-invoicing regime, a mandate, an obligation if you wish. 50% is plus 100 countries. Today we're looking at about 55 countries, so we have another 50 to go. But it took between 2012 and 2022 to get to 20. And we think it will just take another 5 years to get to 50. To get to a 50 more. So that basically means that all of us here on the call, if you do business in one or multiple countries, you will see this level of change. Inevitably, you will have to look at how you invoice your customers, how you receive invoices from your suppliers, because again, make no mistake, these mandates are hardly ever only on the supplier side. There are always requirements on the buyer as well. And there are many of them. And they all come in different shapes and forms, which are very difficult, again, to abide by And that again is another reason why you need to start looking at partnerships. But the real story here is that you need to start looking at a strategy, and you need to move yourself out of potentially where you might still be. And I saw earlier from one of the polls that quite a number of you are still in paper invoicing, that you've still got 90% of invoices coming in as paper PDF. The moment the government makes these changes, that changes with it. It's, in a way, it's a fantastic impetus, it's a fantastic stimulant for electronic invoicing is basically the government mandate, but it forces you to change. So rather than following every mandate, every obligation as it happens and try to keep up, what you will find really quickly is that if in the next 18 months you need to do 6 countries in Europe, you will not be able to keep up. It's simply too difficult. So today is the right time. Literally, do not wait till tomorrow. Today is the right time to start thinking about how you will be dealing with this, how you can be not reactive, but become best in class. What we've seen from Jaroslav is that best in class is not rocket science. It means that you look at where you are, where do you do business, where are your suppliers, where is your business local or domestic? Do you know if that government is going to impose a mandate over the next, let's say, 1, 2, 3 years? You can start making an assessment of whether you are going to be able to cope with that. And I assure you, if your conclusion is that this is going to happen in more than 3 countries that you currently do business in, you'll struggle. And that's where you need to start looking at partnerships to isolate you from the ongoing change, the complexities. It's their bread and butter, these partners, they do this for a living, so you can keep focused on your business. And that's the whole story here. So don't firefight. Become best in class. We know it's a difficult journey, but it's still an awful lot better than having to fight fires on an ongoing basis. If you don't know where to start, we're very happy to get you started there. And if you want to reach out to us, feel free, and we'll be more than delighted to put you on the right track. That brings me back to Susie for questions and a last, I think, a poll question. Susie, so back over to you. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ruud. So in the last final minutes of this webinar, a poll question for you. I mean, obviously, a very clear picture being illustrated there by Ruud. So we're putting this poll to you now. Would you like to book a demo with Tungsten Network? Would you like to complete a compliance readiness check with Ruud and his team? Would you like to sign up to compliance country updates that's put together by Ruud and his team? I think they share them on a kind of every other month basis. Would you also maybe like to find out more about upcoming AP webinars provided by Tungsten Network? So please tick all that apply there. And then meanwhile, we really just have time for one key question, which I'm going to put to you, Jaroslav. So we've got a number of questions that have come through, but just one. Jaroslav, you talked a lot about the intimacy and having the intimacy within the relationship between you and or your kind of project lead, the sponsor at Upfield, and then also within the Tungsten Network. How do you garner that intimacy? Was it luck in your case? Is it something that was kind of invested heavily into? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
If I understand the question correctly, I mean, the kind of intimacy is this is not based on luck. This is based on more the trust and the mutual understanding of the requirements and what needs to be delivered. And therefore, this is based on the ways of working, on the whole governance model which is being built around it, to make sure that nothing is being left to chances. Yeah, and you have the open and honest conversation all the way right from the start of the project to the moment you close it. So now I think luck is a good thing, but you can't subject your fundamental projects on a basis of the luck. So it really is something to work on and to make sure that this is being done properly.
Yeah, Okay, good. All right. Well, we had a good response there to the poll question, Rude, to follow up more with a demo and also a compliance workshop. So obviously there's a need there to kind of find out more about the compliance aspect that's concerning a lot of organisations now moving forward. We do have one final poll coming up on your screen about some upcoming webinars that Shared Services Link is sharing with you over the next kind of 6 weeks or so. Yaroslav, huge thanks to you for sharing your story. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you. And Rude, thank you, always a pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to welcoming you next time. So thanks for your time and attention today, and we'll see you next time. All the best. Cheers. Bye.
Yaroslav, you're a hero.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ruth. It was great to listen to you as well, mate. Pleasure. I'm looking forward to us working, you know,